giving him the bird. You know, the finger.
Yes, I know the finger, Goose.
Flippin the Bird. Hey, what's up guys? Nick the Informative Fisherman here on behalf of Lucky Tackle Box, and I get the pleasure today of introducing you guys to Flippin the Bird. This is a hollow belly style bird. Not a frog, a bird. This one looks like a little swallow right here, which is absolutely awesome because we all know those things start making little nests and flying low to the water. And bass eat birds, they eat ducks, they eat frogs, lizards, snakes, they eat everything. They're opportunist feeder. So when they come up and blow up on a bad boy like this, there's no better way to send your way. Going back, driving back to the house like, oh my gosh, do you remember that blow up? So let's get started guys, let's break it down and I'll show you how to fish this puppy. Good one. Real good one. Flippin the Bird. On that bird, just like that, nice solid 5.5 pounder. I'll take her. Okay, so what makes Flippin the Bird unique amongst other hollow belly action style baits? You know, like your traditional frogs. Well, right here, exclusive lever action hook, I read on the package. What lever action means is that where the eye connects, the hooks don't connect there. There's a swivel in between, which means if I bend the head forward, see that there? That the hook stays in that position, or that stays in that position. What that helps is if a bass comes up and completely engulfs your whole bait, if the hooks are fixed to that eye, that means to set those hooks, you have to arc the whole entire bait, which pries the bass's mouth open to leverage those hooks in. With this style, is if this is sticking out and you set the hook, it bends it, and then the bass's mouth slides down against those hooks. So that's a lever action or cam action, whatever you'd like to call that style right there. Now right out of the bag, you clearly see it looks like a bird. It gives you a different presentation. The legs aren't off the back, so this will skip very, very well. It's like a oblong torpedo shaped style bait, which also helps for walking in place. When you're walking the dog, you twitch, give it slack, it'll stay right there tight. So you don't see me trying to cover a whole lot of water. I'm casting up to key structure cover and kind of working it in place and giving the bass to come out, the opportunity to come out and get it. When you first get it, you're gonna see that the hooks are bent inward, okay? They're coming together like that. You can see they're kind of pointed together in a sense, and they're touching the bait. This position of your hooks right here is, I say, snot mode. Means you could throw it into the thickest, nastiest of snot and it's not going to drag out with snot covered all over it. Your hookup ratio will be lower if you're throwing it around lily pads or timber this way here. But most people have the mindset of when they're fishing a frog or a hollow body style bait, it's over snot. But not always. These baits are very versatile and they get a lot of big bites. So I'm gonna show you what I do to these hooks for when I'm not fishing in snot. If I'm fishing in snot, I'm gonna fish it the way it comes right out of the package. So what I'm gonna do when I'm fishing over grass, I'm gonna point those hooks, instead of inward towards each other, I'm going to make them perpendicular to one another. So I'm gonna grab my needle nose, make sure I don't grab on the barb, hold that shank right there. You can kind of push your thumb against the side and work it out. Oh my shaky hands here. Don't worry, I don't stab myself. I was born with essential tremors. So now when I look at these hooks, they're much more parallel with one another. What that's gonna do, it's gonna help me around more of a open cover. I don't wanna do this on snot grass as much, but you can still see the hooks are slightly touching the back of that bird. Now my buddy Billy Hines likes to do this a lot, and every guy does it. The funny part, he calls it kill mode, is where he opens the hooks up a little bit, bends them up slightly a little bit to where they're slightly off the back, to where those hook points are sitting slightly off the back. Now if a bass comes up and swats at your bird or your frog, that hook point is already on them, to where if they're just slapping at it and you're missing a lot of fish, that's the way you want to do it. Straight and slightly off the back of that frog. A little bit more like that. Now this is not for fishing in snot, this is more for around lay down timber or skipping up to rocks or around boat docks. That's how you would want to set those hooks up like there. But if you're fishing around snot and in snot, keep it the way it comes right out of the package, and that's going to put more fish in the boat. On the bird. Tweet, 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 tweet. So what'd you do, Nick? Well, simple. I gave him the bird. And he got all offended. You know, the bird. I know the bird, Goose. Nothing great, but still a fun fish on the bird. Adios, amigo. All right, guys, so when it comes to casting the bird, today the ultraviolet is 7. We've been having some really high indexes lately. You know, anytime the UV's over 5, I generally want to focus around heavy cover or grass that comes up really near the surface, or shade pockets or under boat docks. For example, you see where I'm standing here, it's really bright. We have a UV of 7 today. Bluebird skies, not a cloud in the sky, high pressure. These fish are gonna move into heavy grass, move into shade lines, or move under boat docks. As I'm coming down this bank here, I'm on the California Delta. And if I chose a riprap bank, which would be all rocks, they taper down, okay? They're designed to block water from penetrating through, because riprap walls on the Delta prevent flooding and water breaking through in the walls flooding neighborhoods. So what I like to target is islands out on the Delta, dirt islands. And the reason why, we have a current that goes back and forth. So it washes out little undercuts in the dirt on these islands. So in these shade pockets, right up against the bank where you may not think the water's but 10 inches deep, occasionally as the current washes it out, it'll make it a few inches deeper. And bass love to hold where a depth transition is. And a lot of the time on these islands, it's right up to the bank. So even though your shade line may be this big, there may be an undercut along the shoreline, just a few inches deeper, that's gonna hold that bigger fish. And that's where I just pulled that 5-pounder out of that on low tide. So what I clearly looked for here was an island that had trees over it, long shade lines, where I know it had current going against it, to where I could look at the bank. If the bank's tapering out gradually, I know there's not an undercut against it. But if I see the bank coming straight down, I know the current more than likely has washed one out. So what it does is it gives me target areas. As I'm coming down, I'm gonna skip my bird back under these trees, up against that bank, and then work it really slow through the shade pocket, work, 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 and I'm gonna pause it. I'm walking the dog, that means slowly retrieving line as I'm popping the rod tip down. It makes that bird work back and forth, side to side, and you wanna throw pauses in, especially if you're not getting bit while you're walking. That pause and that bird pausing right over their head is going to drive them crazy to come up and get it. That last one came on a pause, so you wanna be careful how much time you spend in a key strike zone. If I see something that looks prime like this, I'm gonna try to work my bird real slow and add a lot of additional pauses. If I'm coming down the bank, and take a look right here, you'll see this snot grass. This is Brazilian Elodia right here on the shoreline. If I'm coming down and there's thousands and thousands of yards of this, I'm probably gonna work around it real fast and not pause my frog very often. But if I see that key spot, I'm gonna pause and work it much slower. When it comes to fishing any hollow body style, whether this is the bird or the frog like this, as I'm skipping it in there, and skipping is imperative. If you don't know how to skip, look up my video, bait casting techniques under my Informative Fisherman channel. I'm skipping the bird back under there. This is a technique that takes time and practice. You want some braid or some heavy fluorocarbon to do this. Now you see me skip back under there. I have no idea if my bird's wrapped around branches. I cannot see my bird, so I want to pay really close attention as I'm walking it and listen. I want to listen. If I hear any movement, I want to stare at my line. You always want to stare at your line and listen, to where if you see your line jump a little bit, you want to reel down and set it. Or if you hear the splash, count to 1,000, reel down and set it at that point. If you feel like you're tangled up on branches, I see guys often pulling with the rod tip up. You don't want to pull any sort of bird or hollow body out with tension in your rod. If I cast under there and I feel it snag, I want to point my rod straight, because braid doesn't have any stretch. And I'll just pull it with tension, tension, tension. That way if it pops over the branch, it doesn't come firing out. It pops over and falls, and it stays in that strike zone. If I have a lot of tension, or if I'm pulling my rod, when that bird pops out of a snag, it's gonna come flying forward and wrap around another branch. You're gonna lose a lot of baits that way. If you feel like it's hung up, point straight at it, put your thumb on the spool, and pull with a little bit of tension. I'm running that 65-pound braid. I'm gonna break off most branches. It's not 100% fail proof, but it will save you a lot of baits, keep your bait in the water more often, and catch you more fish. I'll show you guys a little trick for casting over docks. If you have a hollow belly, they're very weedless, you know, popping it up near the bank. If you don't get bit where you can physically see, you put your rod tip down. Watch my rod here. Watch my rod. You put your rod tip down with slack and you reel fast, and it'll launch your bait right back over the top of the dock like so. Let me show you again. You work it in place, you don't get bit, put your rod tip down real fast, and that momentum with your rod tip down as it's running up to the dock, it naturally gets flung out and over the top. With that dock casting technique, you don't want to do that at an angle because your line will slide down. You need to throw directly 90 degrees. So watch as the end of this dock starts becoming perpendicular with this boat perfectly sideways here. I can physically cast over, work it, tip down, bring it over that dock. But I don't want to be at any sort of angle at all. I want to be directly with it. And the same thing goes here. I'll throw it over there, shake it a couple times, don't hear it hit, make sure I have slack, reel down fast. It's going to throw that bait back over. If I hook that fish and it feels like that fish is pulling down on me, I'm going to get the boat all the way up to the dock, hold as high as position as I can until I hear the fish splash, then I'm going to try to lift it. If you don't hear the fish splashing, it's nose down, it could be under the dock, your line could get snagged. If you hear the splash, he's on the surface, usually free of a snag. I go right up against the dock, pulling up high. If I hear the splash, then I'm going to try to slide him over the dock. Now, if you're coming down a bank, a long stretch of bank that doesn't have any sun on it, and you have a floating dock, physically skipping under those docks into those pockets, working it really slow in the pocket and pausing it there is really good. There's not a lot of shade. They're going to choose to pull up on this dock. Once I get it out of that shade line, I'm going to reel it back in. There's no reason for me to retrieve all the way, and I'm going to skip all the way back under the next one. Stay in those high percentage areas, get it back to the boat. Once you're out of there, skip under the next one. Get it out of that light, skip under the next one. All right, guys, when it comes to the equipment I'm fishing the Bird on, I'm fishing it on a Sticks Topwater prototype rod right now. Me and my buddy Travis Moran have been designing all these rods, and I'm super stoked how this one came out. It's a this one right here is about a 7'4" fast action with a little bit longer handle, which makes it super easy for walking the dog. This is something you want. You want a rod with weight in the back, a longer handle, because you're going to leverage these fish out when you set the hook. Plus, when you grip the side of the reel to do that walking the dog motion, you need leverage back here. You don't want a tip heavy rod. So we spent a lot of time designing this rod to be absolutely perfect. Just enough tip, ton of backbone, ton of leverage in the back to make it easy working it all day. I like a fast action reel, a 7-speed and up, and a lot of people hear that faster reels, the drag power is not as strong. But let me explain how to get around that. When you cast up there and you're working the bird and he blows up, you put your thumb on the spool when you set the hook. Once you get that fish moving and start reeling, 12, 13, 14 pounds of drag is more than enough. And you'll hear drag pressure on hook set. You'll hear that term right there. What that is if you don't have your thumb on the spool, your drag's locked down and you hit them as hard as you can, yeah, maybe a 13 or 12 power drag reel isn't strong enough at that point, but all of us experts hold our thumb on the spool when we set the hook. That being said, I'm fishing it on 65-pound braided line. Everybody says, is that overkill? No, it's not. You can fish it on 30, 40, 50, whatever you want to do. The reason I fish it on 65 is I often find that skipping a hollow belly is way easier on 65-pound line. It doesn't knot in on itself. If I'm looking to make really far casts with a frog, if I'm fishing off the bank, I'll fish it on 50. If I'm off the boat where I'm skipping into targets or leveraging them over boat docks, I like 65. It fishes way, way easier. And then I'm gonna get on that fast reel. The nice part is I'll cast up and fish 1 or 2 feet off the bank, and then I'll have all this open water in front of me here where I wanna burn that hollow body back. I wanna get that bird back as soon as possible and put it back up into that strike zone again without being too close to the fish. So that's why that fast reel is critical. That's why that heavy braid is critical, and that's why the perfect rod is critical to catch tons of topwater fish and have the time of your life. So that's my setup. Now I want to talk a little bit about hook set. This is a very controversial subject in regards to hollow belly presentations like Flippin the Bird here. A lot of guys will say, as soon as the bass blows up on it, the second they blow up on it, set the hook as hard as you can with heavy braid. Let me tell you why this is wrong. If you're walking the dog and there's slack, a bass comes up and he eats it from this direction and there's slack. You set the hook as hard as you can on slack line, it's going to pop the bass's mouth open and he's not gonna get it. Everything in nature naturally wants to get away from something that has a hold of it. If somebody grabs your leg or an arm or a predator or someone walking through a dark alley grabs onto you, you're gonna try to get away. You're gonna pull away. So I say, as soon as you see the bass blow up on it, reel down. Reel down to get your line tight. If he's got it, he's not gonna let go. It's going to increase tension and it's gonna turn it into the correct position and the bass is going to lock down tighter. And you'll see me do this. This is all less than a second. I'll reel down and set the hook. If you tell yourself, reel the slack out before you set the hook, it's also gonna give your brain enough time to notice if that bird's still sitting there or if that fish has it. That you could also do the blow up 1/1000 and set the hook if you're having a problem with that, but always reel, get your line straight, get your line tight. Don't set the hook the second they blow up on it. A lot of time they'll come up and swat it and you twitch it again, they'll come right back and completely engulf it. Bass oftentimes love to wound the prey before they grab it. So don't set the hook the second they blow up on it. It's absolutely okay to give them a second or two. I've had so many people on the boat with me that didn't even realize the fish blew up on their frog, swim it up around the boat for 10 seconds, and I'm like, reel, 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 and the fish managed to hook itself. 9 out of 10 times, most of the frog blow-ups that people miss are from setting the hook too soon. So when do you fish the bird? When do I like to fish the bird? 65 to 60. Once that water hits 65 in the spring, I notice that's right around when bass are spawning, and some of them enter the post-spawn is when the birds generally start to nest around shorelines and in tules, and that becomes highly effective right at the base of those areas of where those birds are nesting in the trees or along shorelines or upside boat docks. 65 degrees is right when that water temperature is great. A lot of people start fishing topwater around 58, 60, and yeah, I do a lot of topwaters around that time like walking baits, but for hollow bodies, I really like it when they start moving back into matted vegetation. Right during that post-spawn or during the spawn, those fish that are up there near the shallows are gonna look for matted vegetation to hide in, boat docks to hide under, and you need a very versatile weedless tool like Flippin the Bird here to get in or around that type of structure or cover. So when I say back to 60, that means 60 degrees in the fall. I'll fish it all year long, late spring, all summer, all fall. Now, on the bright sunny day, I'm gonna fish it in and around heavy cover. Now, if I say heavy cover structure, you see all this snot right here? These bass will live under this, but you need to hit those little pocket areas or little gaps in this mat to get them to come through and get this. But I'm really trying to place this in shade, under boat docks, or near shady banks as much as I possibly can. So I'm gonna fish it year round. Now, what's the prime conditions for a frog? Overcast is prime conditions for a topwater, but what I really like is a bright, sunny day. Something that's going to jam these fish into key targets that I can focus on targeting. It's a weedless bait. If it's an overcast day or early in the morning or later in the evening, I'm generally not gonna fish a hollow body, but if there's a lot of snags around and it's early in the morning or later in the evening, I will, strictly for the ability for it to be so weedless. One other key thing I want to add to that, guys. These things are the 4-wheel drive lures of fishing. Place this in the worst spot you possibly can. Cast farther back into stuff, over boat docks, over ropes, as far back as you can possibly get them where you know nobody else can cast another lure. Those are often the casts not taken, and they're the least pressured targets on the whole lake or the whole river where you can place a bait like this, and it's the fish that could be the fish of a lifetime sitting right there. And if you're willing to make that crazy long distance cast or over the top of something, you're going to catch the bigger, badder fish that everybody else was too scared to cast to and lose the lure. So use that little 4-wheel drive deal right there. I'm Nick the Informative Fisherman, and that's Flippin the Bird. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel below and check out all of our other videos. Greatly appreciate you guys watching, and we'll see you next time.